Loves here. I am wearing an orange hat, and today we're going to be talking about the Fruity Limiter. Look at this thing, it's glorious. Broman dude, meet the Fruity Limiter, meet the Broman dude, or Brodet, Woman, Dudette. I don't even know. But anyways, it's a limiter, and I'm going to assume that you know what limiters are, what compressors are. We're going to be talking about what they are as we go, but I have put a plethora of links in the description to my video series on Maximus. It's also in this series that explains, if you can understand, if you've watched that series, then you already know what a number of these knobs do. But we didn't talk about this limiter and what it does. So let's go ahead and get into it. If you watch those videos, pretty much you're set. You should be able to just dive in and understand what this is. But here's another video specifically on it. So first off, before we get into this thing, we should probably understand our viewing display and also what a limiter is for. So a limiter is for a couple different things. This is what's called a look-ahead limiter. It is a magic limiter that can see the future. Just kidding. It's a really smart limiter. It will delay your audio signal so that, as we know in compressor land, a compressor can only turn on once something has passed its detection. So we set a threshold with a compressor like so. Look at there. That blue line represents our threshold. If audio passes this threshold, then our compressor goes, whoa, audio just passed our threshold. Turn that audio down. And it will send a little bunch of goblins after that audio and push it down back below the threshold. However, a look-ahead limiter is much smarter. A look-ahead limiter builds like a brick wall for the audio to try and get past. So it delays the audio, and then it can perfectly squash it down with its band of goblins. It will keep it perfectly below our threshold. Now, the threshold in a limiter, a look-ahead limiter in specific, is not called a threshold because nothing will ever pass it. So nothing can get past it. It's impossible to pass. So this is called the ceiling, which is the SEIL. This is the ceiling, and it is green. So the ceiling here, now if you ever see green in this plugin, that is your output peak. And we can see it up here. We have these display knobs, and you have one that's green for your output peak. Now, because this thing delays audio, and it's controlled by your attack knob, very similar to the way Maximus is set up, because it can delay audio, we can have an issue if we're not set up right. So basically, if everything else is coming out immediately, but this thing's delaying everything, you're going to have problems depending on how you're using it. Man. Okay, so to just make sure you're all hunky-dory, make sure you go to your mixer, plug in delay compensation, and then make sure automatic is checked. Once it's checked, you're good to go. Okay, otherwise you can control like your specific delay on each channel using these here clocks down here at the bottom of your channel strip. But we're not going to worry about those because you're on automatic, because we're not like, that'd be kind of weird being that freakishly controlling it all. Okay, so there are reasons though, like if you want to set up a mix or something. So our green is our output peaks. Next we have, I'm going to put this back to normal. You can middle mouse click to set things to default. I believe I'm at default. Let me just make sure I'm at default because that was weird. Okay, so now we've got our purple one. Our purple is our input peak. So what's coming into our plugin. So what comes in is purple, what goes out is green. If they are the same, it will appear as white on our thing. So right now, our gain is at nominal. Our output is at nominal. We're not saturating anything. And if I play this, this is the most amazing, this may be the best vocal sample you've ever heard in your entire life.
The source of element is the self.
And you can see that this is white because the input matches the output. So that's exactly what we would expect to see. So that's a great handy dandy thing. Now this is a single band, as far as I know, limiter. So it should not do any weird phasey things to your signal. Broadband capabilities. So that's what these are. So as you see, we turn off the input. We can see our output screen. And if we turn on the output and turn on the input, there it is. It's purple. Now these other ones, this is the band analysis envelope. So you can see your compression envelope in turning on and off with this dude. So we are going to see that. So as it moves around, that will be it showing us how our compressor, what it's doing to our signal. If you see a lot of lines with this guy, that usually means the compressor is turning your audio on and off, turning the volume on and off really fast, so fast, in fact, that it actually adds harmonics to your series, so it's a distortion. Sometimes people will use it creatively, but normally this is not a good distortion, and the way you can fix it is you can change your sustain, which is the amount of stuff it needs to process before it makes a judgment about whether or not it needs to change the volume of it. we'll talk about that in a second. Our last one is we have these two lines. These are our show level markers. Is that what it says? Markers or meters? Markers. And you see this? Boom, those disappear. This is just showing us where we set our stuff. So like, oh, look, our ceiling's there. Look, our gain's there. But if we turn that off, oh, where'd it go? I don't know. So we leave that on. Now in the middle, this is 0 dB full scale. I can't remember if I said that already, but 0 dB full scale. This last guy is the speed knob. It's not a drug knob. It's like, you know, how fast, because I know you're always thinking about drugs. So if we come over here and change, now I've kept it on top by going in here and putting detached. It lets me float on top of things. You can do that for most Windows in FL. So if we play this, you see it's going, you know, it's going.
The source of
It's like, yeah, regular speed. We can make it really slow.
the source of element.
Like, there it is. It's coming. Or we can make it really
The
fast.
source of element.
And so it's like it took speed or did drugs or something. I don't know. Speed, coke, weed, like, it's just drugging up. Okay, I know those do different things. Okay, so basically that's the speed knob. So now let's come down here, and we've talked about a look ahead limiter. It can look ahead and stop audio from passing the ceiling. So let's talk about these knobs, and then we'll relate it to these. The first one actually is the easiest one. This is gain. It's your input gain. I really wish it said input gain, because that's what it is. And if you turn this up, it will put more audio in. But at the same time, it's also going to put more audio out, because if we don't pass 0 right now, we've basically said don't do anything. Just don't let anything pass this line is what's here by default. Now, by default, when you first open up FL, it's actually the gain will be up here because they like to boost audio, because louder stuff, psychoacoustically, louder stuff is pleasing. There's a lot of reasons why, but it just is. If you want to know that, you can go over to my critical listening series. We talk all about that mumbo jumbo. But it's more pleasing when... For mixing, it's terrible, though. It eats your headroom. It's like you think your mix is great, and then in reality, you actually have less headroom than you thought. And if you're like metering using something, you'll be misled. So make sure that this is at default. You could even save it as a template. I have a video in the FL Workflow series talking about how to save templates so that you never have to deal with that junk again. So you want to reset it by middle mouse clicking or alt clicking, and it will also reset that. So we go there, alt click. That was window click, alt click. There we go. Now, once we have this, that's our gain. So this is setting the audio coming in.
The source of element.
And you see we just effectively made it louder. Next, we're going to skip over here, whoop, to the attack knob. Now, this is basically a compressor, but these attack knobs are a little different. This attack knob is not attack. This is look ahead. I wish it didn't say attack. Your attack is always going to be perfect with this plugin. Now, if you don't want delay, you put it at 0. So we have 0. So it's still look ahead, but this takes quite a bit more processing.
The source of element.
And if you have like a lot going on, this could push you over the edge. Now, by default, I believe it's at like 50 milliseconds. And what it's going to do is, if you've told it to, you know, do some sort of compression curve of some kind with your limiter. So if you look up here, it's very specific. It says limiter attack time, limiter release time. So this is specifically the limiter. If we go over to the compressor, it's different. They're not connected to the delay. This is going to delay the audio because we told it to do something by 6.89 milliseconds. Not that much. By default, I guess it's not up by 50 by default. What's the default? Oh, the default's 2. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But anyways, we're going to make it really long. So it's going to delay it by 1 second. So very noticeable, 1,000 milliseconds. And if I play, you'll notice that it's going to take a while for my play to play. So I'm going to do 3, 2, 1.
The source of element is the
So-
sound.
And it takes a while to turn off too. That's because we also have a release time. And basically what it's doing is it has to, it's taking that time so that it has time to properly attack and address your offending things that are going to pass your threshold. Like it's just taking its time so that it can perfectly compress what's coming at it. Okay, cool. So that's that. Now, normally that's not such a big deal, especially at default 2 milliseconds.
The source of
Yeah, that's below latency level for most people. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's the attack. The release, of course, we know from compressor land, which a limiter is just a compressor with a higher ratio. This is a little bit special because it's got that fancy delay. Maximus has the same thing. And our release, of course, is how long it takes for it to turn off. So our attack is once you've passed our threshold, our ceiling. In this case, it can't pass it, so that is theoretical. Once you've squashed it, how long until you stop turning it off? So let's say that we have like 4 decibels of offending frequencies going past our threshold. Let's go to compressor land. So we can pass the threshold. So we go past the threshold, 4 decibels. Our attack goes, whoa, we're turning you down. We've been told to turn you down. Every time you go over 2 decibels, we have to turn you down 1. So we went over 4, so we have to turn you down by 2 decibels. And so we turn you down 2. But then the question becomes, after you go back across that line, that threshold, when do they give you those decibels back? Because they're taking away 2 for everyone. So they've taken away 2 decibels. When do you get those 2 back? Because you would think as soon as you cross, but then that'd be weird. It'd be like as soon as you cross the line, you'd get louder all of a sudden. So you don't want that because that will create pumping. So we have this release knob, and the release knob controls how fast it will release it. So if you go back and you set your release knob, it will take you up here it says 167.12 milliseconds before, or I've changed it now, but it will take that long before you get those decibels back. So that's what the release knob is in a nutshell. Lastly, we have the sustain. The sustain is an interesting dude, and I'm going to show you some weird stuff that can go on. But the sustain, basically all the sustain says is how much audio it has to look at before it can say, hey, change the volume of that thing. So if we've got audio coming in, if we have a really low sustain, it's going to say, as soon as you pass, activate, do something. But on this one, it's going to say, let me get a few more samples. Let me look a little bit more at this audio, and it will smooth out our automation. If this is really fast, you're going to get this like crazy looking thing if your attack and your release are super fast. We're going to take a look at that right now. So let's say that, first off, let me show you that you cannot pass this thing. If I put my threshold, my ceiling down here, nothing. We can see our input is purple, so we can see that stuff's coming into the limiter, but nothing's coming out because we have an amazing look ahead limiter that just says freaking screw you audio and sends its goblins to go push it back below the ceiling. So we're going to bring it up, and now let's say that we can let, just a little bit out. So that much. We can even turn our input gain really high up. It does not care. And now I'm not sure. Yeah, I have muted my speakers. I'm not sure how much experience you have with limiters. That's a pretty transparent compression, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, it sounds super, super, super compressed, but I mean, like, it's pretty impressive for like the severity of it. If we were to bring this up, the source of element, it's like it's very well done. Things for the settings we've given it are pretty extreme. So we've turned it way up, and then it's saying we do not let it pass. So if we were to analyze this, we could say, oh, look at the purple is our input. So we see, oh, this was the original, and then this is the one we listened to the second time. Look at that. Our green is the output. It never passes that green line because remember, this is a magic limiter that has the ability to look into the future. It just delays the present. It does all it does. It's a big procrastinator. And so we have here this white line. This is the compression envelope. So you can see it turning on and off. It's basically mirroring what's going on here. It's turning it so that it does not pass our line. That's all it's doing. So you see here we have a little spike right here. Oh no, spike. And a couple others. So basically that's what's going on. I don't usually sweat very much about that guy. What sets me off on a red flag when I look at this guy is if this guy's doing a lot of like little movements. That's not good. So if we turn our sustain way down, the source of element is the sound. Oh, we have to be breaking the laws again. So look at our threshold. That's not cool beans, man. The source of element. So it's doing okay right now. Let's see if we can like really screw this up. So we're gonna take our attack way down. So as soon as stuff comes in, now remember this isn't a normal attack. It's just basically controls the look at it. So no big deal. But our release says how fast to release it. So if all 3 of these are down, it's gonna go attack, release, and then what's the sustain say? Do it immediately. And so as a result, you get this. The source of element is the sound. So, yeah, you can see whoa, look at that. That's probably pretty dicey. If we bring our sustain up, the source of element is the sound. You get this stepwise thing. That is also not nice. You don't want that either. So, I really like the way they do this. So, if we bring this down, we get like this middle ground. The source of element is the sound. But it's still not what we want. If we don't want that, those are all very audible. What we want is our attack, we'll bring our attack, but we'll bring our release up. Even if our sustain is way down, if our release takes its time, we'll maintain some of that curvature. The source of element is the sound. Now you see we're still getting the chop, so we'll bring our attack up too. The source of element. We get even more of it back. And so now if we bring our sustain up,
The source of element is the sound.
So you can achieve different levels of like severity and like complexity from this. So if we look at our first, I mean, you can just compare them. You see, now it's a small deal. Oh, we just lost him. Okay, let's do.
The source of element.
And we'll bring our attack down.
The source of element.
We'll bring it up.
The source of element.
Bring that
The
down.
source of element.
Okay, cool. And they're going to be small differences. Like look at the holes right here versus the holes right here and right here. And I went through a bunch, but all I'm saying is that you can achieve different levels and curves and types, and they'll attribute different coloration to your sound. So that's just something you can do. Now, this is with a ceiling that's been set friggin' low as just an example. But when you hear people like going, I don't like what this does to my sound, and you like swear there's no difference because you've never been trained to listen for this sort of a thing, there is a difference. And it's very noticeable to people who know what they're listening for. So now this is pretty obvious when we put our line up there. You can see this is small dips. We got a little bit bigger. These ones are a little more curved in, deeper. This one is not quite as wide as this guy, and it's a little sharper, but not quite as sharp as that guy as far as like the dip right there. Boop, boop. So anyways, that's the limiter. Now we have this option. This is our saturation. So saturation, if you ran your stuff in an analog compressor and you drove your compressor really hard, when it passes 0 dB in digital land, you would clip and you'd get this horrible clipping sound. And we can emulate saturation like a compressor would do for an analog sound. So an analog compressor would be like, oh no, it passed 0 decibels. Oh well, like it doesn't care that much. So it'll fix it still, but it doesn't like kill it. A digital compression will kill it. It'll be like, kill it, get it, die. But not an analog compressor. So what we have here as an option is saturation. Now, let's go to another thing because I'm sure my most amazing vocal, I don't want you to like be transcendent or something or be enlightened. That'd be bad. I need you to stay here and watch the rest of my tutorial. So we're going to use this here wonderful guitar thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to saturate it. So you see right now our output matches our input. All we're going to do is we're going to turn the saturation on. This is a type of way of basically turning down the signal. And it will behave differently when we begin to move our ceiling. Well, I believe it behaves the same. It's a little weird. I'll explain why it's kind of weird in just a sec. So as I play it, we see we have purple. So our output's being turned down. And it's applying a type of distortion. Because now distortion in this sense is our signal is not what it was. So it's been distorted. It's that simple. So some people think that has to sound crazy. Some of this actually sounds quite nice. You might consider using like an element of this, like distort up to here. Distort anything that gets into this range is basically what this is saying. You also notice that we can, the highest we can set our saturation is 0 dB full scale. So yeah, but we can set our ceiling above that. So you can achieve with a mix that's like running right up there, you can get some pretty cool saturation effects. Now, it's weird because check this out. Right now, it's applying some amount of downward compression, essentially. It's saturating it, distorting it, basically. Now, if we take down our ceiling, we've brought it down below before what it was doing. So now it's got to use the Magic Goblin look-ahead compressor to turn it below our ceiling. But then we get that. So it's not as simple as it looks. The amount of compression seems to be based somewhat on the input peaks because we get this like flat line. So that could be a very desirable thing though. Right now it's pretty extreme and severe, but let's say that we've got a mix just bumping right up here, and we want to get a couple more dB out of it to make it sound a little bit louder so that we can, beat our neighborhood producer at our neighborhood producer street battle because, got to win those. So what we do is we saturate the top end a little bit and bring the ceiling down. And then we can turn the whole thing up after. Now, to do that, we would need another compressor. But that's just some tips and tricks to get a little bit out. Now, those are terrible tips and tricks, though, because they steal all the punch out. If you're going to a battle and you can control the volume, you should make the best killer mix you have. And then when your turn's up, just turn the volume up. And then you'll have a punchier sounding mix, generally. So a lot of this mixing stuff to make it sound good when you're not in control of the volume knob the way you'd like to be. And even then, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. A lot of opinions fly, a lot of philosophies. I like the idea of just turning your volume knob up and making a killer mix, but it's just not commercially viable because everyone else takes this other strategy because people don't know how to listen to music. They think they do. So that's our knobs right there. Audiophiles do. They know about this stuff. So we have a couple other ones here. We have curve and curve. This is so if we come in here, we can change our curve settings. What are these? Well, these are curve settings that control basically curve 1. If you look at this, it looks like this. Boom, boom. So that's the attack curve. So it's a much sharper curve. And then curve 8's like this. Boom. Something like that. It's much more, it's bigger, more swoopy. And so that's just so when we turn our release on, how is it gonna turn on? It's pretty easy to demonstrate with a compressor. So I suppose we'll talk about it when we get there. So anyways, that's that. Now you'll notice that this ceiling knob is in a separate colored background than these other knobs are. That's because this over here is a global setting, so it never goes away. And the gate actually is separate, but for whatever reason, they kept it as a global thing. I personally like that. If it doesn't need to go away, why make it go away? But these controls here are specifically for the limiter, and these are specifically for the compressor. So pretty simple dealio. Now, let's talk about the noise gate. So, or these knobs too. What they basically are, we could talk about these a little bit, but if you look over here, you see this down arrow stores a setting. So if you have some sort of setting, let's say, oh no, I want to store this and compare it against something else. So you could store it in your spare state, and you click this button to flip with your spare state. So we're gonna make a setting of some kind, blah, 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 and we'll store it in our spare state. Then we'll make a new setting, blah, 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 blah. And I would say, hey, I wonder what that compared against our other one sounded like. And then we can flip them like that. Boom, boom. And we hit our flip from spare state. And that's that. So that's pretty simple. It's a pretty common thing in FL. Next, I've also paused it. So you just click to unpause it. Okay, let's move on to the compressor. So that was the limiter side of things. Let's move on to the gate. I said I was going to do the gate. So a gate is basically a downward expander. What does that mean? Well, it says noise gate here, but you can use it for so much more. What a gate allows you to do is basically it's a gate. If you have a threshold, and then if signal passes the threshold, you turn the volume down by so much. Sounds like a compressor, sort of, but it's a lot more severe. And so we have a release, but there's no attack knob. That thing freaking turns on and shuts it down. Now, let me show you. So let's go to a drum loop. I have a drum loop here. Here's drum loop. And so it's great, right? Now let's turn on our threshold. So this threshold basically says where we're going to be turning stuff down. This gain determines how much we're turning it down by. So as we turn our gain down, it will say, hey, right now we've set it to negative infinity decibels. So I don't even get much softer than that. What it basically says is, hey, anything that passes that is below, not passes our threshold. I said passing, my bad. Anything that's below our threshold. So anything that's in this area, turn that down by infinity. So that's pretty severe. If the signal gets passed, then it is permissible. It may pass. We do not care. This is great for things like noise that never get above a certain level, but your audio does. So you can shut down the noise without shutting down your audio. But then you have an issue of sometimes it sounds really like your audio will bleed in and out. Like you have this choppiness to it. That's called a chattering gate. And you fix it by changing your release. So it's similar to the release on these other settings. How fast does this thing activate and how fast does it turn off? Release. How fast does this thing turn down and then come back, basically? So the release, that's a terrible description. It's the release. How fast does it release, basically? So right now we have infinity decibels. And so if we turn it on, we see that we had some of the stuff get through. If we turn our release down, nothing gets through. Now, if we turn this up, our threshold, so basically if we turn our release way up, it takes a while for our gain to turn on. It's a little weird because it's release, it's not attack. But I don't know why I think it should be attack, because as it turns on, you think it would attack to turn on, but technically it's releasing because it's turning the volume down. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know. Anyways, that's what goes on. That's the behavior of the thing. Now, our gain, if we turn this down, we'll only turn it down by that much. So you see it's less severe than our previous one. If we turn it up even more, you can see that there's still a little bit of purple where it was turned down a little bit, but it's much less severe. So if we go down, And then if we turn our release way up, it does very little again if we turn it way down. So you can use this to color things. Now, if we turn our threshold all the way up, nothing. Except for that, because that goes above our line right there, which it shouldn't be able to do. Yeah. That is strangeness indeed. It shouldn't be able to do that. But anyways, you get the idea. So that is the noise gate. Maybe I did something weird. If someone knows I did something weird, let me know, because I tend to do weird crap when I'm doing this sort of thing. All right, now let's talk about the compressor. So compressors are pretty simple deals. We have a couple knobs here, and a compressor, of course, has two parts. It has a compressor part that says, hey, this is the compressor. This compresses the audio. So as audio comes in, it's the compressor's job to turn the audio down. However, the compressor has a companion, a crime fighter, helper. I don't know. His name's the detector. So the detector lives inside the compressor, and the detector looks at the audio and says, hey, should I compress it or should I not? And then depending on what the detector says, if the detector says, whoa, compress it, then the compressor will compress it. So they're two separate audio paths. So we could send audio down one path, but not the other. So we can send audio to the compressor, but not to the detector. This means that we can send different audio to the detector to tell it how to compress something else, how to turn the volume of it up or down. That's what this side chain is here for. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Let's talk about how to get this detector to do its job. You know, we want him to be a good detector of audio. Audio detective. So we have this threshold knob. This is the threshold knob. And what it basically does the same thing that the threshold knob does over here. So you're already familiar with this because you know about compression. So we set our threshold. Anytime that audio tries to pass this threshold, we will get a reduction in audio depending on how we've set our knee and our ratio. So let's talk about that. So we have this guy, it's called a ratio. This determines, so our detector says, hey, audio is past our threshold, but now it's got to say to the compressor a couple other things. Basically, how much do I turn it down by? The compressor asks, and the detector says, oh, by nothing, because it's 1-to-1. So this effectively would do nothing, as you can see. But if we turn on our ratio, now we're saying, hey, every time, this is a 2-1-1. It's a little confusing because there's three numbers, but basically this is, you can 2-to-1. Just pay attention to the first and the last. The middle number is like a middle number. So right now it's saying, hey, every time 2 decibels passes my threshold, Mr. Compressor Dude, turn it down. Only let 1 decibel pass. So for this, every time 2 decibels passes, instead of it being 2 decibels louder, it's only 1 decibel louder. And so you can see we are now getting audio compression, and we can see our detector and our compressor activating. So this is the compressor. If I change the curve, so you see it's pretty sharp. Watch this. If I put it on 8, you see how much rounder that is? That's pretty noticeable. If we go like 4. So we get various colorations on our signal. So that's what the curve does. I told you it's easier to demonstrate here. Well, for me anyways, because you just turn it on, it does the thing. Okay, so that's that. Now this is the curve for both the attack and the release, as you can see. And this one, they have separate curves. So you can control them individually over there. Now, okay, well, now that we've discovered our compressor, what's this knee setting? Well, this knee setting says, you know, how harsh is this detector dude? So if we have a knee hard, he's going to do it like immediately. Let me show you what this means. So this has to do with the compression envelope and the way the compression envelope is generated. I cover this in the Maximus videos, and you've watched those, so you should be familiar with this. But let's go ahead, and open up a Maximus. And it's a little confusing, but they have a line that you actually see this line, well, the shading come in and out. That's the compression envelope. It's not the volume setting. So that's the compressor and how it's turning on and off. Now, a hard knee would look something like this. So it would look like that, basically. That's a really hard knee. This is a limiter. But the knee is essentially the curve on this part. So right now, this is a soft knee. So as the compression envelope turns on, it's less angry, it's less intense. It's less intense near the beginning, and it grows to be more intense near the end. Now, if we were to do something like this is a sort of a weird one. It's very intense, and then it grows less intense near the end. Or it changes. It's not necessarily less intense near the end because the end's where the end is at. So it changes the way the compression envelope interacts with the volume controls in the middle though. It's a little more of an advanced topic, but if you must know, that's what it is. And if you think I sit here and like analyze what my crap's going to sound like that, you're insane. I just know what it sounds like because I've experimented and I've learned what the different curves sound like. That's how you're going to learn anyway. So just mess with the different knee settings. So you see you have various knees. And you also can go backwards. So this will actually expand. So it will pull audio up. So it's kind of cool. You can go backwards and expand a little bit. So you can have a ratio that for every 1 decibel here, what is this, 1 to 4 or whatever it is? For every decibel here, it will pull up your signal by 4 decibels. See, that's very loud. You can see our output peaks are now larger than our input peaks. So expanders are very, very useful for things like maybe transient shaping kicks, but I prefer to do multi-band expansion. I talk about that with Maximus. But there's a bunch of interesting options you can do with here. Okay, so the attack, how fast it turns on, how fast once it's past your threshold, then your compressor decides this. This is basically compressor settings. So these are like your detector. Here's your compressor. And your compressor attacks it by like so fast, if your compressor, maybe your detector is really intelligent, does his job great, but your compressor is really stupid, so it takes him a while to turn the volume down because the attack's slow or up or whatever the detector says. So the detector could say turn it up, like who knows. But the attack, it's a stupid compressor, but you can make it really smart and go like that. So 0 milliseconds, very smart compressor. The release settings, same way, how long it takes to release. So once it goes below, how fast do you get those decibels back? And then the sustain says how long the sustain says how much audio you essentially have to look at, how many samples of audio before you make a judgment about turning it up or down. The sustain, before you change your envelope. So the amount of time before your envelope endures a change. I don't know. It's a weird way of saying it, but I'll show you an example of it right now because I don't know. I don't have like the greatest sentence for that. Sorry. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the sidechain input now because that's really the last thing we have to talk about. Everything else is being covered. So let's talk about this. Let's get a kick drum. Let's see if we can find a kick. Let's go to a heavy kick. Why not, And look at, you can even see the envelope. How glorious is that? So I'm going to go to default here. And I'm going to do this on another channel. So we need a couple things to do this well. First, we need a synthesizer. So we're going to use Harmor because it pops up fast. We're going to do this. And we're going to use a saw wave. So we're going to put this here. And why not? We'll do that. Okay. Now let's make a new channel and grab this. Okay, cool. So we have here our saw wave. That's all it is. And what we're going to do is we're going to send it down the compressor path. So we're going to put him, Control L, send him to mixer track. I don't know why I opened up one when I'm working in a template that has some of them already loaded up, but whatever. We grab our fruity limiter and insert it. So it's coming in this limiter. And now we're going to go to the compressor because we don't care about the limiter. The limiter's been set to basically, do nothing. So we're going to go to our compressor, except put a limit on stuff. So sometimes that can change your sound quite a bit because you might be clipping out a channel input, but when you get to your master, that's where the compression happens and it can sound very different. So I've had it happen all the time when I was doing sound design. So as soon as you put a compressor or something, it colors your sound. So sometimes it can do things you don't want. All right. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go to so we have our audio coming in. That's really handy dandy. And we're going to go to our compressor. And if we compress it right now, it'll compress the actual audio. We don't want that. And we also need this to be a bit louder. Okay. Next, we're going to create a kick pattern. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on a new pattern. We're going to find our awesome kick that I just grabbed, which I believe is in the audio folders. Oh, I don't think I put it on there actually. Okay, we'll put it on there. Put it every 4 beats. And now we are going to, now we've got this. And it needs to go to a track, so we'll put it in a track. And we're going to sidechain it by shift-clicking the input of that channel. If you FL workflow, if you're curious, there's one on the mixer that I talk about this. But how to make your first song in FL Studios is as a series if you've never used the mixer like that before. So now it'll appear because when shift-click, that sends this signal. I call it the soul of the audio. It doesn't send the actual audio there. if it's green, that's sending the actual audio. But when it's white or when it's empty like this, it's sending the signal of the audio as if it were the audio, so that a detector can, I don't know, I guess detectors can see the souls of audio, but a compressor can't. So a compressor wouldn't see this at all. But because our detector apparently is also some sort of, I don't know, prophet or something, he can see the kick. So there's the kick in our sidechain input. We turn that on, and now this compressor will compress that audio determined by how the kick is interpreted here. So we're going to put our threshold low, and nothing's happening because we don't have anything coming in to our compressor. So we'll turn that on. And next we're just gonna, turn that down according to the whims of our compressor. So take our knee in our ratio. We need our ratio, that way it actually does something. So see, we'll make this quite severe. We'll turn our release up. Now we can have problems with just too much of this line if it's too fast. And what we could do is we could smooth it out by turning our sustain up. So with both of them, we get that distortion, so we can smooth it out by changing our sustain. That's basically what one of the good uses of the sustain. There are others. But yeah, it's just a general smoothing is how I look at it. Because you can look at it that other way. Changes the amount that it looks at. But anyways, that's basic compression. So now you understand the fruity limiter. If you have any questions else about the fruity limiter, let me know. I hope I covered things in a way that was easy for you to understand. That was my biggest goal. Because I'm assuming you're not watching this if you know your stuff about compression and limiters and stuff, then why would you watch this tutorial? So if you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.
So it's completely, different.